Thank you for joining my webinar, Trading Partner Collaboration on Steroids and How Simple Technologies are Reducing Complexity. My name is Donnie Askin. I'm the CEO of Origo. For those who have been following my blog, found at www.origo.com/blog, you know that I'm new to this space. I'm a software guy and a 2-year student of the global sourcing and trade management space. I've spent the past 2 years getting firehosed on this entirely new ecosystem. I'm glad to have this opportunity to present this webinar to you and share with you a bit of what I've absorbed, and perhaps introduce you to some fresh perspective and new simple technologies to help reduce complexity out of the supply chain. These are tools and technologies that you can add to your arsenal to defend your margin, responding to the ever-changing landscape that global sourcing and trade management create. Let's stop for a moment and have a brief audience participation piece. Please raise your hand and note which finger you use to ring a doorbell. Now, which finger do you think your children use? Hold on to that thought, as its relevance will become evident a bit later. There's so much I could talk about today. I could talk about visibility associated with the private label supply chain space, business intelligence, compliance, quality, whether private label and global sourcing is at its apogee or its perigee. But what I'm going to talk about today is the fact that global sourcing is complex stuff. It is not getting any easier. There are a lot of forces working against you as you try and maintain your margins. The fact of the matter is that business process and workflow remain ripe for continued optimization, and that within that, social networking tools leveled within the context of enterprise collaboration, which is an entirely new category, can help you protect your margin. So why does a brand owner or retailer get involved with global sourcing and private label? Well, that's simple. It's all about margin and all about brand. An old friend of mine, Paula Rosenblum of RSR Research, in a recent survey noted the percentage of retailers who indicated that at least half of their merchandise was private label grew from 42% in 2008 to 55% currently. That's an increase of some 31%. 90% of those executives that were surveyed expected that percentage to increase in 2012. And why do they do this? Because they can capture some 8 to 12 percentage points of EBITDA margin from the middleman. In terms of brand, private label branding provides differentiation against the homogeneous commoditizing tendencies of retail. So this global sourcing isn't easy stuff. It's intrinsically complex. Compound that with global sources, all that's involved in designing and manufacturing and importing, the complexity grows exponentially. As a retailer or brand owner, you're connecting suppliers and manufacturers to your design team, to the raw materials which must be sourced and transported, and then the finished product must be moved by water, air, and land to the markets. If you're already involved in global sourcing, then I'm preaching to the choir. You already know all this. But if that weren't enough, it continues to get tougher. This year alone, 2010, the minimum wage in China has increased some 20%. The cost of cotton since 2009 has grown 82%. Container costs since 2009 have grown 200%. In terms of compliance, and in particular CPSIA, penalties include $100,000 for the first offense, $15 million for multiple offenses, as well as the prospect of criminal prosecution with a 4 to 5 year mandatory sentencing if found guilty. If that weren't enough, consumer demand is flat. All of these gnaw at your margin. Bruce Rockowitz, President and Executive Director of Li & Fung, has been very vocal about the fact that the days of labor deflation are behind us. With regard to cotton, just last week alone, the New York Times highlighted an article that noted that a number of domestic retailers, including some of Origo's customers, such as the Bon-Ton, were raising prices due to the cost of cotton. This was after they had substituted cotton components with synthetic linings, smaller buttons, less expensive fabrics, more polyester, as well as continuing to pursue cheaper markets. Let's talk a little bit about labor. As I mentioned, labor costs are rising. Minimum wages in southern China and Beijing up 20% in this year alone. The industry adage that companies chase the lowest cost needle is changing. In its place, companies are developing more nuanced strategies that include both enhanced factory productivity and diversified sourcing bases to mitigate rising costs. According to the Department of Commerce, shipments to the U.S. from Mexico grew almost 20% last year. Shipments from Indonesia 18%, Vietnam 30%, and yet China still by far is the largest with over 30% last year alone. Although there are cheaper markets to go to, none of those markets have the depth and in many cases the skill set to replace China. So much of the work and manufacturing remains in China. So besides the cost of labor rising, so are logistics costs. But let's take a step back. It was just a year ago that the German publication Spiegel noted that the shipping industry was fighting for survival, that the global economic crisis was wreaking havoc on shipping. Demand and prices had collapsed and ports were filling up with fleets of empty freighters. The crisis fueled cutthroat competition, and there was question whether many companies would survive. Germany's Hapag-Lloyd alone needed 1.7 billion euros to stay afloat. As you can see from the chart above, charter rates plummeted between 2008 and 2009, and also pictured there are empty container ships in Singapore Harbor. Nearly 10% of the global fleet sat idle. Now let's fast forward 12 to 15 months, and the whole scene changes. U.S. and EU regulators are investigating container carriers for price fixing. Ships remain mothballed throughout the world in harbors, canals, and inland waterways in an effort by the carriers to maintain their prices. Ships themselves are running slower, doubling their transit time to conserve energy and reduce energy costs, leaving containers and ships empty longer. Retailers were scrambling to get fall goods in place in time because of the global shortage of containers, and the cost of those containers skyrocketed. Late ships, high-value items were all getting air freighted at 10 times the traditional shipping costs. Arrigo itself had calls from numerous customers to help them get through this short-term this situation, and we were happy to help. One of our customers, a leading domestic retailer, was shipping their apparel and footwear product line in refrigerated containers because that's all they could get their hands on. Transportation and logistics costs have been rising as a percentage of the cost of goods sold, and this has occurred as a result of rising fuel prices, the intrinsic cost of long-distance flow of goods and transportation, capacity imbalances, both for domestic transportation in regions like North America, as well as for international ocean and air freight from countries like China. Pictured up here, you can see the dramatic rise, almost threefold, in terms of the price of containers between 2009 and 2010. Raw material costs are rising. So let's talk about cotton again. First of all, just a couple of years ago, there was slower demand because of the global recession, so crop sizes were reduced. As demand returned from a slowly improving economy, there was significant growth in demand from emerging economies like China. Production was increased. Increased demand against short supply was compounded by flooding in Pakistan and India, bad weather throughout the region, the growing regions in China, all creating shortages. Pictured in this graph, you can see the comparative monthly costs year over year. You can see in January of 2009, cotton cost about $57 a pound. Come September, October 2010, it was up to over $104 a pound. That was a 15-year high. It's simple supply and demand, and Sharon Johnston, senior cotton analyst for First Capital Group, indicated that it will take at least 2 years for cotton production to catch up with consumption. Then there's compliance. Compliance costs are growing. There's increased regulatory requirements, environmental, product safety, and so forth, increased enforcement and penalties. I noted the CPSIA penalties a little bit earlier. There's increased expectations in terms of requirements in terms of traceability. Besides federal regulations, there are state regulations. All of this requires people, IT, and resources. In terms of costs associated with factory compliance, there's factory evaluations, legal compliance surveys, factory security surveys, final inspections. There's corporate and social responsibility compliance requirements associated with ethical sourcing, environmental initiatives, restricted substance lists. It goes on and on and on. All of this increase your costs and gnaws at your margins. So now that I suspect you may be collectively depressed, what can we do? What can we do? Well, there are a number of things that can be done. First, by increasing your visibility into every aspect of your private label and global supply chain, you can find where the problems are and hopefully deal with them in advance of them becoming problematic. You can focus on increased productivity. You can adopt lean manufacturing techniques. You can continue to seek cheaper labor markets, even though that may in fact be a short-term strategy. And you can improve your trading partner collaboration. Now, remember a few moments ago during our audience participation piece, I asked you about which finger you ring a doorbell with and which finger your children do. The answer lies in the fact the ways that new technologies are being leveraged and embodied in the new social networking tools. More than likely, you answered that you ring a doorbell with your forefinger, and your children, in fact, ring a doorbell typically with a thumb. They ring it with the thumb because they are so accustomed to texting, and the thumb is a primary finger for doing just that. The fact of the matter is that there is a whole new community of technologies associated with social networking, and these are tools that allow for instant messaging, audio recording, video conferencing, as well as content and community building. Now, when I talk about the social networking technologies, I'm not talking about crowdsourcing on your design or demand side, but rather the new category called enterprise collaboration. Now, this is key. This is a key new simple set of technologies to improve trading partner collaboration that can improve design, improve quality, save time, increase accountability, bring your trading partners, whether they be internal or external, closer, and in just one application allow you to better leave your failures at the factory. So there's been an evolution in collaboration. I can go back to obviously pen and paper and faxes that evolved into email, and then there was technologies that emerged that allowed for real-time collaboration in the form of Skype and social networking tools in terms of Twitter. Well, these combined all together under the umbrella of enterprise collaboration are beginning to approach the ability to service the needs of the larger organization. So let's talk a little bit about enterprise collaboration. First of all, collaboration itself is a much hackneyed term when you talk about global sourcing and supply chain. But when we talk in terms of enterprise collaboration, Collaboration 1.0 really represents the first generation of business collaboration, where there were tools that allowed us to focus on documents that were created that could be then shared by the individuals that needed them across the entire enterprise. The PC was the primary vehicle for conveying and reading and transmitting this technology, and the information typically resided safely within the walls of the enterprise, and yet personal productivity was improved. Along comes Collaboration 2.0, and this shifts the focus from documents and PCs to people and social sessions. The social session is defined as the new fundamental unit of collaborative work in which groups of individuals interact across company and geographical boundaries. The goal of a social session, and this is important, is to create the effective presence within the reality of absence. Social sessions are the new fundamental unit of collaborative work. Again, the goal of a social session is to create the effective presence within the reality of absence. This new collaboration experience helps us cope with information overload by delivering only what we need, just when we need it. We can find experts, trading partners, etc. in an instant and participate in blogs, videos, wikis, social networks, team spaces, online communities, and conferences from a variety of devices. Thanks to advanced security and policy management, we can include partners, customers, and suppliers in a one-to-many communication. As you can see from this slide here, as we automate our transactions through data aggregation, we've reached a point of diminishing return in terms of its ability to help us become more efficient. In the area of enterprise collaboration, we're really at the very beginning of the cycle, and this data coming from Cisco indicates that there is enormous opportunity to optimize and therefore drive down costs and improve margins through the use of enterprise collaboration technology. So again, remember the doorbell finger question? Over the next 20 years, some 72 million baby boomers will be leaving the workforce. New Gen Xers and Gen Yers will be new workforce entrants, and they will be replacing these 72 million baby boomers. And these new Gen X and Yers will have a new communication paradigm, as evidenced in the surge of adoption and utilization of the social networks. They ring the doorbells, as I mentioned, with their texting thumb, and they don't have watches because they get their time from their cell phones. Their preferred communication devices will be cell, tablet, and mobile devices, and the tools of communication will be Twitter-esque, WebEx-esque, Wiki-esque, and instant messaging-esque. All this will flatten hierarchies, increase collaboration, and virtualize presence. I suspect that many of you are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, and that deals with human need. In conjunction with enterprise collaboration, there is a hierarchy, and it goes along these lines. At the very base, the quickest win you get from embracing enterprise collaboration is cost savings. You can cut down on mistakes, improve turnaround, and get information instantly from any source. Next up from that is revenue generation. By empowering, enabling your trading partners and participating with them as partners, you can foster new revenue sources. In terms of the next tier up, customer satisfaction. Customer empowerment and communication, making them part of the community, is another advantage of enterprise collaboration. In terms of employee satisfaction, engaged and empowered staff and their ability to find the right person to foster ideas is all facilitated by enterprise collaboration. So if you start with the notion that ideas come from individuals, and that ideas are the basis for finding like-minded colleagues, and that ideas are in fact social objects, and that objects become projects, then enterprise collaboration is the plumbing that facilitates all of this. Next tier up, cross-organizational collaboration. If this technology enables that, it will improve outcomes by allowing access to a diversity of knowledge and perspective. It will build stronger bonds within as well as without your organization, and it will help reduce redundancy of effort so that parties that may otherwise be working on similar projects but don't know it can be collaborating together. If the end game of any organization is to create an innovative culture and organizational agility, then enterprise collaboration has a great deal of promise. It allows you to see and react to market changes faster, shift resources in response to new opportunities, and empower your stakeholders to recognize opportunities and threats themselves and act accordingly. There are 4 cornerstones to embracing enterprise collaboration. So it's not just about Twittering and WebExing and so forth. It must contain these other attributes. First of all, it must be multimodal. And what I mean by that is that different individuals and different circumstances warrant different technologies. Instant messaging is not the preferred technology for all kinds of enterprise collaboration and transactions. Some people will prefer instant messaging. Some people will prefer video camming. Some people will prefer email. All of these technologies must be available so that the best technology that is appropriate to the situation, as well as the best technology that's appropriate to the individuals involved in the situation, are readily at hand. Secondly, it must be integrated. Let's face it, all of these technologies are commodities today. Most all of us have access to instant messaging and email and video and audio camming and so forth. But these technologies must be tightly coupled and integrated into the workspace so that the use of them becomes part of the process, not an external step. So they must be tightly integrated into an integrated desktop or within the transaction set. Most importantly, these social networking sessions, these enterprise collaboration sessions, must be archivable and attachable. And what I mean by that is you must have the ability to capture these sessions in real time and then attach them to things as the sample, the purchase order, the RFQ, and so forth. So by making these enterprise collaboration sessions archivable and attachable, you create accountability, you cut down on errors, and they become a resource for future reference. So let me just talk about 2 examples of how enterprise collaboration have been used in environments that I have seen. Origo has a customer that develops and creates very high-end jewelry. The cost of making a mistake is very high. Some time ago, they introduced they bought a 10x webcam so they could collaborate from the East Coast of the U.S. with their manufacturers in Asia and have quality sessions and design sessions that they could work closely with their partners while looking at the design. With the advent of enterprise collaboration, those sessions can not only be captured, they can be archived, and that way, if there's any question about the design, there is a record of the design session. If when the goods actually hit customs sometime later, there's any question about the quality or the design, there is a document that can be reviewed and accountability can be assigned. And in doing this, it basically puts both manufacturer as well as designer on notice that they are accountable to do this right and do it right the first time. And another recent example, and I've got a spreadsheet that you're looking at here on the slide, of the cost of mistakes. At a recent AAFA conference, there was an example presented, the manufacturing of a cashmere sweater. The cost of that sweater was $40. The retail was $160. There was a quality issue found, and when the goods arrived at the domestic warehouse, and the question then was, do we correct it here domestically or do we send it back to China? Well, had enterprise collaboration tools been in place, the inspection and quality review could have actually happened while the goods were still in China. The sweaters could have been repaired while they were still in China, and the incremental cost for correction would have been a rather small hit to the gross margin of the product. The fact of the matter is the issue was found here in the U.S. The thought was, do we ship it back to China to have it be repaired for lower labor costs and then reshipped back to the U.S., or do we repair it here at a much higher labor cost but avoid the logistics cost? If you take a look at the analysis on the slide, you can see the differential in loss margin based on these three options. The fact of the matter is, with enterprise collaboration tools, in this very simple example, had they been utilized early on in the factory, the failures could be left at the factory, and the cost to the retailer would have been minimal, and therefore protecting margin. So I hope you can see that with the availability of enterprise collaboration tools, there's a lot of opportunity for cost savings. So let me leave where we began, and that's with the simple notion that global sourcing is complex stuff, that there are a lot of forces present today that make it such that it's not getting any easier, that business process and workflow remain ripe for continued optimization, and within the business process and workflow framework, social networking tools leveraged within the context of this new category called enterprise collaboration represent a very strong weapon in your arsenal to protect your margin. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed this webinar.